Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to part 3 of the Minority Colleges and University Pre-Application Conference. Today's presenters is myself, Nikita Chambers, Miss Angel Mason. You may hear from some of my colleagues, Ms. Denai Pauly, as well as Mr. Gregory Menora. We will now get started with the pre-application conference. This is part 3 of 3. This topic is budget pitfalls and measuring success for the minority colleges and universities. Notice of funding opportunity announcement. That no-phone number is MBDA OBD 2022 200 7301. Before getting into the teleconference, I want to provide some protocols. This teleconference is focused on the MBDA Minority Colleges and Universities Broad Agency Announcement for eligible institutions of higher education. Those institutions are Historically Black Colleges and Universities, HBCUs, Hispanic Serving Institutions, HSIs, Tribal Colleges and Universities, TCUs, Native Hawaiian Serving Institutions, NHSI, Alaska Native Serving Institutions, ANSI. Please place your questions in the chat and they will be answered periodically throughout the presentation. Please keep all questions relevant to the topic at hand and try to avoid from duplicating questions. The overview of today's teleconference, we will discuss important dates and reminders, the MBDA strategic alignment and program priorities, budget pitfalls and examples to include budget pitfalls and common mistakes, standard application forms and samples, measuring success, which includes performance measures defined, goal setting, goal breakdown, some additional successful tips. Of course, we will have a question and answer session. There will be a slide on the agency contact. Important dates and reminders. This notice of funding opportunity announcement is funded under CFDA number 11802 for minority colleges and universities. Please note, MBDA has extended the deadline to June 3rd, 2022 at 11:59 p.m. Please note that MBDA only accepts electronic applications via grants.gov. That website is www.grants.gov. The anticipated award date for this competition is October 1, 2022. Now for some exciting things. MBDA strategic alignment and program priorities. MBDA's vision. MBDA is the champion for minority business enterprises. Our mission. The mission is to promote the growth of 11 million minority business enterprises. Did you all hear that? Our mission is to promote the growth of 11 million minority business enterprises. Strategy. Our strategy is to increase the number of minority business enterprises and their gross revenues.
Ms. Chambers, what are some of the common mistakes and budget pitfalls?
So some of the common mistakes that we have seen over the years is missing budget years for the entire segment of the award. For example, if the award is a 2-year award, then you should provide the required standard forms for each of the programmatic years. Transposing numbers. Please verify your numbers with the notice of funding opportunity announcement. For example, if the award amount is $300,000, please ensure that all of your numbers on your budget narratives is in the amount and equal to the total amount of the funds. Alignment of the standard forms. Your SF424 should be completed in its entirety. The authorized organization representative should sign and date the forms electronically, submission in grants.gov. Your budget and your budget narrative should also match. If proposing more than estimated of the award amount, recognize that the agency does have a limited funding. For example, if the federal funding amount is $300,000, please ensure that your budget and your budget narrative is in sync to match the $300,000. Completion of the standard forms and your budget narratives. If this is a 2-year award, which it is, please submit an SF424A, which is the budget, and a detailed budget narrative for years 1 and 2. Also, make sure that the standard SFLLL, which is your lobbying form, is signed and dated and submitted, as well as the CD 511. Please, please, I cannot stress this enough. Please make sure that your organization is registered in SAM, and that website is www.sam.gov. Please do not wait until the last minute. This is a critical action and it can take up to 2 weeks to process. Please note, MBDA does not oversee the System for Award Management website. Before moving to the next question, I do have a question in the chat. Are we showing the total for the 2 years on section A of the 424A? The 424A, the budgetary category lines should be completed for years 1 and years 2. If the federal amount is $300,000 per year, the SF424 total should be $300,000 for year 1 and $300,000 for year 2.
Another question, Ms. Chambers. Will unspent year 1 funds carry over to year 2?
So MBDA does have 1-year funding, which means the fund should be spent in its entirety in that 1 year. Circumstances have come up due to COVID in the past, and if there's something you need to rebudget, or is there something that you cannot do in those year funds, year 1 funding, you will have a contact at the NOAA Grants Management Division to communicate with, and that is for successful applicants if you need to rebudget funds to ensure that the funds are expended in year 1.
One more question in the chat. It says there is nowhere to indicate year 1 versus year 2 on section A. Can you provide a sample?
Later on in the presentation, there will be samples of the forms, but you can indicate year 1 and year 2 by when you save the budget in the budget narrative in grants.gov. You can save it as year 1, and then you can save it as year 2.
On to the next slide. What are the standard application forms?
So the standard application forms is your signed standard form 424A, which is your application for assistance, your standard SF424A, which outlines your budget and the budget category lines, your signed SF424B, your SFLLL form, which is your lobbying form, and the signed CD 511. Please refer to the application package that's available through grants.gov and review each form. Please note, each applicant may not be required to submit all forms listed depending on the project or the application type. Please refer to the notice of funding opportunity announcement to ensure that you are in alignment with what is required and outlined.
So you've mentioned all of these standard forms. What is the SF424 and why do applicants need to complete and sign this form?
Great question, Ms. Mason. The standard form 424A, as I just previously mentioned, is the application for federal assistance, which requires basic information about the applicant. For example, it has the name, your address, your telephone number, the type of applicant, your email address, very detailed information, the authorized organization representative information, a list of sources and proposed funding, and a description of the proposed project. Please note, again, one important factor, the authorized organization representative must submit the application package electronically via grants.gov so that their electronic signature will show up on the application. Please note, electronic signatures submitted through grants.gov satisfies this requirement. One form will cover all funding periods, and this is the SF424. This is an example of the SF424, and the entire form must be completed. This is page 1. There are 4 pages of the SF424 that should be completed by each organization representative. I'm going to take a pause. I have a question in the chat. In the SF424A, what should we enter in section A, budget summary for grant, program, function, or activity? Do we enter year 1 and year 2? We have a sample of a 424A coming up, and I will address that question.
Ms. Chambers, can you explain the budget information, the non-construction programs, and why they must be submitted for all budget periods?
Yes, the 424A is the budget information for non-construction forms. This form is used to request grant funds for non-construction programs. This is a non-construction program. The program at hand is the Minority Colleges and Universities NOFO. Again, this form must be signed by the authorized organization representative. Please note, very important, the authorized organization representative signature must be on every form, and it must be the exact same signature and name. A sample of the SF424A. In the far left column, you see the budget categories: personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, supplies, and so on. In column C, for the federal funding, if you have any of that funding, you must enter it. For example, personnel. If you have $100,000 in personnel, your budget narrative must explain $100,000 in personnel and break it out. How is that $100,000 broken out? For materials and supplies, if you have general office supplies, that funding amount should be in column E. Any materials and supplies that's over $5,000 will go in the equipment line. If you are charging indirect costs in J, your indirect costs will be applied here, and you will need a negotiated indirect cost rate. For all non-federal funding, if this grant has a required match, you will enter the non-federal funding in column D. You will submit this form for 2 years, year 1 and year 2.
What is assigned SF424B?
So the SF424B is an assurance for non-construction program. As I indicated, this is a non-construction program, and this form is used to assure compliance with the statutory requirements for non-construction grant programs. Again, the authorized organization representative must sign the forms. If the forms you have do not look like the forms that I just submitted, then you are probably looking at some incorrect forms. The forms are generated through grants.gov. So when you click on the link in grants.gov to apply for this initiative, these forms will be produced out of grants.gov. This is an example of the SF424B. At the bottom of this page, the authorized organization representative, there's a block to sign and date. Before moving to the question, I have a question in the chat. Do we upload our federally negotiated rate agreement and the other attachments forms? Yes, you can. And if you charge indirect costs, we must have a negotiated indirect cost rate, a current negotiated indirect cost rate. Next question.
What exactly is the signed CD 511, which is the Commerce Department CD 511?
So the CD 511 is a form certification regarding lobbying. This form certifies that federal funds have not been and will not be used for lobbying. Let me reiterate. This form certifies that federal funds have not been and will not be used for lobbying. This application will complete the SFLLL if lobbying activities have been undertaken using non-federal funds. The CD 511 language will be included in the award documents for all, and all sub-recipients shall certify and disclose accordingly. Again, this form should be signed by your authorized organization representative. This is a sample of the CD 511. I would encourage you to read it regarding the lobbying activities, and the highlighted section at the bottom should be completed by the authorized organization representative.
More forms, Nikita. So what is the SFLLL, and do applicants need to include it?
So the disclosure of lobbying SFLLL, if lobbying activities have been or will be undertaken in connection with this federal grant, the applicant must complete and submit the standard form LLL. Used to disclose lobbying activities that have been secured to influence the outcome of a federal action. The form is required whether lobbying or not. It is a required form and should be signed and dated. This is an example of the SFLLL form. The form should be completed in its entirety as well as signed and dated by the authorized organization representative.
So what's involved with the budget narrative? How
So
do
now,
applicants complete a budget narrative?
So now, Ms. Mason, we get to the good stuff, the budget narrative. The budget narrative must align identical with the standard form 424A. There must be a complete budget narrative submitted for all years. If this program is 2 years and you submit your SF424A for year 1, a detailed budget narrative must be submitted for each year separate and apart. The applicant must provide a detailed justification for all budget items in sufficient detail to enable the proposal reviewers to evaluate the appropriateness of funding requested. For example, personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment, what I just went over when we had the example of the 424A. The budget justification must be broken out in detail using the same budget categories and align with the completed SF424. For example, on your 424A and personnel, if you have $100,000 allotted for year 1, your detailed budget narrative for personnel should state $100,000, and if it's broken up for the project director and the business consultant, it should be broken out, and the total bottom line should be $100,000. All total costs on the budget narrative must match and align with the SF424A.
So there's travel involved. What are the required travel items?
So for this notice of funding opportunity announcement, and as indicated, each applicant should include in its budget forms and narrative travel costs for 2 key personnel to attend the events included below. In the event that COVID-19 pandemic continues to cause limitations on travels and gatherings, the events will be virtual. MBDA will communicate out if that's going to be virtual, but with application submission, we highly encourage that you submit travel for National Minority Enterprise Development Week. That is an annual conference and one of MBDA's signature events. The National Training Conference is also annual and one of MBDA's signature events. The NOAA Grants Management Workshop, this is a 2-year award. We only need you to attend year 1. Special mention, please refer to section 8 of other information of this NOFO for additional information pertaining to required travel. Again, I want to reiterate, all of the forms are found in grants.gov. That website is www.grants.gov. The AOR, which is the authorized organization representative, should be the person, that contact person submitting this application, because that will be the person who is ultimately physically responsible for the grant.
Ms. Chambers, we have a few questions in the chat. They're asking if there are registration fees associated with the annual conferences that we put on and the NOAA Grants Management Workshop training. They also asked how much should be budgeted for the registration fees.
So I'll tackle the first question. The NOAA Grants Management Workshop is typically virtual conference. It has been virtual the last 2 years, but the estimate for each of them is $1,500 to include your travel and your hotel stay.
Perfect. So moving on, what is an indirect cost rate agreement?
So an indirect cost rate agreement, let's get into that. So it's a requirement if you select indirect costs and you choose to include that in your budget, you must have a negotiated indirect cost rate with a federal cognizant agency. If not, you may elect to charge a de minimis rate of 10% of the modified total direct cost, and should note this as a part of your budget and your budget narrative in your application. I need to address not $15,000, $1,500 per person. You can also refer to the GSA per diem rates to see what the per diem is in the area in which MBDA will host the conference. I would like to address a question in the chat. What are the conferences? The conferences are outlined in the printed notice of funding opportunity announcement. I would encourage each of you to have a copy with you while going through this presentation. If you don't, please refer to grants.gov so that you can review the notice of funding opportunity announcement so that you can align your application with the criteria and the requirements. $1,500 per person per conference should be an estimate.
So, Ms. Chambers, another question in the chat. It says, Anonymous asks, Ms. Chambers keep referring to signatures, but with grants.gov, when they fill out the forms, they do not require a signature. It is automatic when you hit submit. So she's asking, do she have to have a wet Adobe signature on the form and then upload it?
As stated, the signature is the electronic submission. When you submit your application, the AOR submit through grants.gov, it produces the electronic signature, and we take that electronic signature as verification that the AOR has signed it. My reasoning for keep reiterating, because we have had applicants in the past who have different people at the organization submit the applications who are not the AORs.
Perfect. So moving on, next slide. What is the purpose of the Minority Colleges and Universities BAA and the performance goals and measures?
So this BAA is to lay the foundation for future generations of entrepreneurial leaders and innovators that will help strengthen the U.S. global competitiveness, job creation, and the overall U.S. economy. It provides funding for entrepreneurship programs, including curricular courses and seminars, replica products and tools. The applicant must propose a project that clearly defines a plan for the entrepreneurship program to be developed, taught, and delivered to undergraduate students. The proposed activities and goals should be designed to deliver impact aligned with the set of performance measures defined by MBDA. I have a question in the chat that says the application is not available. The application is still open and available on grants.gov, www.grants.gov. In the search engine, if you type in MBDA, 3 different announcements will come up, and you can click on the link of minority colleges and universities if that's what you're interested in applying into.
What are the performance measures?
So the performance measures that are outlined in our Notice of Funding Opportunity announcement, along with detailed definitions, are the number of entrepreneurship courses taught, the number of students impacted, the number of products, services, and innovations created, the number of strategic partners, and the number of business plans. Please note that on the slides, we have outlined detailed definitions, and these detailed definitions are aligned in the Notice of Funding Opportunity announcement.
Ms. Chambers.
Ms. Mason, before moving on to the next question, I would like to address a question in the chat. The $1,500 is not for a registration fee. The $1,500 is for your travel costs as well as your hotel stay. If the costs increase, if there's an increase or if there's a decrease, we will ask for a revised budget and budget narrative from the successful applicant. If one of the conferences are virtual, we will ask that you revise your budget and your detailed budget narrative to exclude the travel costs and move them to a different location.
Another question.
Just to be certain, Ms. Mason, before moving on to answer this question, the new updated submission date is now June the 3rd. Ms. Mason?
Other than the project operator, whom does MBDA consider to be key personnel for the purpose of the mandatory event? In particular, if the project operator is the only named person in the budget and proposal, with all other project partners remaining unnamed as consultants in the budget, can one of those consultants participate as key personnel?
So to answer your question, MBDA allows the AOR 90 days to ramp up. There's a requirement that we have a project director and or a full-time staff person to oversee and monitor the grant. So if the AOR selects the project director to attend and or a business development specialist and or an administrative assistant who is critical and plays a key role in the project, then they can attend. But MBDA is budgeting for 2 personnel to attend. If you want additional staff to attend, they can attend with your non-federal cost share and or your organization can pay for them.
Another question, Ms. Chambers. Our HBCU local Dayton, Ohio partnership is still pending, or otherwise, can one continue underutilized disadvantages minority small business employer?
So to be clear, The eligible entities are outlined in the notice of funding opportunity announcement, and those designees are from the Department of Education.
On to the slides. What are the performance goals, and can you explain the goal breakdown requirements?
Sure. Applicants must include a time phase plan for the development and implementation of their entrepreneurial program, including setting numerical goals for each performance measure. The timing of the goals should take into consideration the academic planning cycle. To ensure success in meeting proposed performance goals for each year of the proposal for the measures listed above, the applicant should ensure alignment of their activities and the anticipated impact. The applicant must provide a breakdown of the proposed annual goals in 6-month increments. The applicant should also include the following: a detailed description of the methodology or evidence that was used to propose the semi-annual and annual goals, identification of key assumptions and or risk that may impact the applicant's ability to meet or exceed the goals, propose contingency plans and or strategies for meeting proposed goals, or when applicants falls behind in meeting program objectives. The organization process for monitoring the accomplishments of goals and objectives. The process should include minimum program measures with the definitions in the program measures and goals section. That information is also aligned in the printed notice of funding opportunity announcement.
Question in the chat, Ms. Chambers. Can the grant funds be used for community education that is not for college credit?
I would like to refer you to the eligible institutions and the program priorities that are outlined in the notice of funding opportunity announcement.
So, Ms. Chambers, back to the slides. What are some additional success tips that you can provide to the people that are in our call today?
So, some successful tips that I would like to provide to you: one is submit a complete application. Submit all the required forms with the appropriate signatures that we discussed. Please note, you do not need an Adobe wet signature. Certification of a signature is received when the AOR submits the application through grants.gov. Submit your application before the official closing date of the Broad Agency announcement, which was extended to June 3rd, 2022, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Align the application with the program objectives and the program priorities that are outlined in the printed BAA. Align the performance measures and goals that are outlined in the BAA. Please ensure that your organization's SAM.gov and grants.gov accounts are up to date and valid. I would like to stress, and you can share the extended deadline with any interested parties that you know. The deadline has been extended to June 3rd, 2022. That information can be found on grants.gov as well as MBDA's website. MBDA website is mbda.gov. This presentation will be uploaded within 72 hours. We have previous presentations that are uploaded to our website. We also have a video of some successful tips on how to submit your completed application. Please note, MBDA cannot instruct you or give guidance on how to write your application. And I want to defer to the chat. Our honorarium and cash prizes allow for students to enroll in training and activities leading to a pitch competition. Unfortunately, this is federal funding, and prizes, cash and prizes, are not allowed. That's an unallowable cost. I will defer you to 2 CFR for allowable and unallowable costs. What is the link to access the past pre-application conference webinars? That is on our link. That link is on our website at www.mbda.gov.
Ms. Chambers, another question in the chat. The period of performance. They're asking when the start and the end dates for the period of performance for the two-year period is.
So the first year begins October 1, 2022 through September 30th, 2023. The anticipated start date for year 2 for the successful applicant will be October 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024.
And then just to confirm, it is approximately $300,000 per year.
So as outlined in the notice of funding opportunity announcement, the award amount is $307.11 per year.
Can the grant, oh no, we read that one, I'm sorry. I'm looking at some of the questions that are in the chat just to make sure that we're not missing anyone's questions. So please excuse my slowness. It was a question in the chat, Nikita, about, here it is. When will the recipients be notified if their application was approved?
So there is a process. Once the application closes on June the 3rd, we do have a merit peer review process that could take up from anywhere from 30 days to 60 days to review all of the applications, to perform merit reviews on the applications. The anticipated start date is October 1, 2022. We have our fingers crossed and we anticipate the successful applicant being notified sometime during the month of September.
Can honoraria be paid to students other than cash prizes?
Honorarium cannot be paid with this grant for the students.
For reporting purposes, financial and progress reports are due when?
So the first financial report will be due in 30 days from the start date of the award, and moving forward, the first progress report is due to cover the first day of the project to the 6th month, and then the annual project will be due at the end of year 1. I would not give specific dates because we have to align them dates with our electronic grant system, because although you are reporting out for the first 6 months, you have an additional 45 days to complete the report before you receive a delinquent notices.
Thank you, Ms. Chambers. On to the slides. What is the unique entity identifier and system for award management?
So we've been talking about that throughout this presentation and how important it is for you to have your organization registered in SAM. And if you already have a SAM account, please make sure that your AOR information is valid. Please register in SAM before submitting the application. We want to encourage you to submit sooner rather than later to make sure that your SAM account is updated. The website is www.sam.gov. Provide a valid unique entity identifier in your application and continue to maintain an active SAM registration with current information at all times, which the applicant has an active federal award or an application or plan under consideration by MBDA or any other federal agency. Please note that federal awards cannot be made if your SAM account is not updated. A special mention, MBDA may not I want to repeat, MBDA may not make a federal award to an applicant until the applicant has completed and complied with all of the applicable requirements in SAM. If an applicant has not fully completed the requirements with your SAM.gov account by the time MBDA is ready to make the award, MBDA may determine that the applicant is not qualified to receive a federal award and use that determination as a basis for making an award to another applicant. So please review and validate that your SAM account is active. And again, that website is www.sam.gov. So I, as well as Ms. Mason, who works in the grants management unit at MBDA, as well as my colleagues, have addressed questions in the chat. We hope that this information session was very valuable to you. Again, this presentation will be uploaded to MBDA website at www.mbda.gov within 72 hours. The agency contact for this notice of funding opportunity announcement is myself. I am Nikita Chambers. My email address is nchambers@mbda.gov. Please note, we have some frequently asked questions also posted to our website that should be helpful with you to align your application with the program priorities, objectives, and criteria that is outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity announcement. This pre-application conference was 3 of 3, so there are 2 other pre-application conferences around the minority colleges and universities that have already been posted to our website. We would like for you to spread the word that the end date has been extended to June 3rd, 2022. We would like to thank you all for your time, your patience in joining us today. And on behalf of the Acting National Director, Miguel Estienne, he wishes you much luck and success in submitting your application. Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. And again, good luck on behalf of MBDA.